On June 21st, 2028, the city of Los Angeles was engulfed in a firestorm of civil unrest. A private corporation with the fittingly cold name of Clearwater had, with a chilling lack of warning, unilaterally severed the public water supply. The result was a full-blown urban disaster, a maelstrom of rage and desperation that was already being called the worst riot in California's history. A citywide curfew had been put into effect, and the police were given a green light to take down anyone they found on the streets after hours. It was in the midst of this pandemonium that two brothers, Sherman and Lev, along with their accomplice, saw a golden opportunity to make a killing by robbing a bank. Their plan, however, went south in a hurry. They found themselves dead in the water when the bank's main vault proved to be an impenetrable fortress. With police sirens blaring and a chilling 2-minute deadline looming over their heads, they were left with no choice but to change gears. Instead of the big score, they had to settle for a handful of quick grabs, desperately robbing the terrified customers of their valuables. As the chaos reached a fever pitch, Lev snatched a fancy pen from a well-dressed man who stared him down and gave a chilling, prophetic warning, saying he would regret taking that pen. Their last-ditch escape plan was to crash through a back wall, but in a twist of fate, they ran straight into a police ambush. A furious gunfight erupted in the alley, a scene of pure mayhem and flying bullets. Though they managed to neutralize the officers, their victory was a hollow one. Their accomplice was killed in the crossfire, and the two brothers were left severely wounded. Lev was in the worst shape, a bullet lodged deep in his abdomen. With their lives hanging by a thread, Sherman made a frantic call to his contact, someone called the nurse, a woman named Jean Thomas, who ran a top-secret, members-only hospital for the criminal underworld called the Hotel Artemis. The clandestine establishment had been in operation for over 2 decades and was governed by a strict, no-nonsense set of rules. No killing other members, no disrespecting the staff, and all weapons had to be surrendered upon entry. All guests were known only by their room names, and that was final. Other patients included a smug arms dealer known as Acapulco and an eerily calm assassin named Nice, who it turned out was an old acquaintance of Sherman. When the brothers and their accomplice arrived at the hotel's fortified front door, the accomplice was denied entry because he was not a member. He got desperate and tried to force his way in, but John held her ground, calling in her loyal orderly, Everest, to forcefully remove the man from the premises. Once inside, Sherman and Lev were admitted, and Lev's condition was critical. He was rushed to a medical bay where John used a cutting-edge medical scanner to locate and extract the bullets from his body. But the damage was already done. His liver was completely shattered. Jean told them the only hope was to use the hotel's advanced 3D bioprinter to create a replacement organ for an emergency transplant. But suddenly, the entire city went black as the police deliberately cut the power to contain the riots. Luckily, the Hotel Artemis had its own backup generator, and Jean sent Everest to the roof to activate a second, more powerful generator. The hotel now stood out as a solitary beacon of light in the darkened city, a clear signal that help was available for those who knew where to look. While waiting for Lev's new liver to finish its print cycle, Jean went on her rounds to check on the other guests. She tended to the wounds of the arrogant arms dealer, Acapulco, and the eerily calm assassin, Nice. After her checkup, Nice made a private call, revealing her true motive for being there. It turns out that to get into the hotel to assassinate her target, she had deliberately shot herself. She was now demanding a higher fee from her client for the trouble. Back in Lev's room, Jean informed Sherman that his brother's upcoming surgery was going to be an extensive one. To keep him sedated and pain-free, he would need an enormous dose of tranquilizers, a type of sedative usually reserved for large animals like elephants. She also gave Sherman a dose of medical nanites, microscopic robots that would swim through his bloodstream and help his wounds heal faster. Sherman, clearly feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders, confessed to Jean that he felt responsible for his brother's injury. He revealed that Lev had wanted to leave their criminal life behind for good, and Sherman had talked him into one last job. Jean offered him a piece of wisdom, telling him that sometimes everyone has to know when to walk away. After she left, Sherman took a closer look at the ominous pen Lev had snatched from the bank. His curiosity piqued. Suddenly, a call came through from Crosby Franklin, the slick and menacing son of the notorious crime boss and the owner of Hotel Artemis himself, Orion Franklin, or Wolf King. Crosby informed Jean that his father was only 52 minutes away and demanded a room for him at the hotel. Despite the fact that Wolf King was the owner of the Hotel Artemis, Jean flatly refused, holding her ground. She reminded Crosby that the hotel had a strict no-reservation policy and only accepted members who showed up at the front door. Crosby was livid, warning her that he would tear up the place if his father wasn't given a room. Jean was not intimidated and immediately told Everest to prepare for a fight. Meanwhile, the riots outside were getting closer and closer, and the sound of mayhem was becoming louder. Everest suggested they all evacuate, but Jean insisted they would be safe. The hotel's structure was built to withstand a siege. With the TVs and entertainment systems down, Acapulco and Nice found themselves in the communal game room. Sherman soon joined them to grab a cup of coffee. Acapulco, a complete showboater, began to insult Nice, calling her a second-rate criminal. But Sherman, with a smirk, had a different take, telling Acapulco that beneath her beautiful facade lay a truly terrifying criminal. To prove herself, Nice shattered a nearby glass and threw a shard of it right past Acapulco's face as a warning. While everyone was distracted by the tension, Sherman subtly swiped Acapulco's wallet and, with a sleight of hand, took a specific ace of spades playing card from inside. While Joan and Everest were on the ground floor, Crosby and his crew arrived, storming the exterior of the hotel. Acting on a chilling order to make sure no other members could get in before his father, they began welding shut all the outside doors with specialized gear. But as Crosby's crew was sealing the last entrance, Jean spotted a severely wounded police officer, a woman named Morgan, pleading for help on a security camera. Jean felt a gut instinct that she knew this woman from somewhere, and despite the fact that she was not a member, felt compelled to help. Everest warned her not to go, reminding her that in all their 22 years, a non-member had never been treated at the hotel. He knew that if Wolf King ever found out, he would tear the place to the ground. Ignoring Everest's warnings, Jean made her way to a secret exit to rescue Morgan. She made her way and passed by Sherman. As she made her way through the lower levels, her breathing became ragged and her body began to shake. Her agoraphobia, a paralyzing fear of the outside world, was kicking in. She had not left the hotel in over 2 decades. Jean got to the door, and with a final surge of courage, she pushed her way out. The world outside was a visceral shock. Her hands trembled as she looked at a photograph of her son, Beau, who died 22 years ago, a tragedy that had confined her to the hotel ever since. Morgan recognized the boy, revealing that he was her childhood friend. Just then, a group of police officers arrived and began shooting at 2 nearby protesters. The police then turned their attention to Jean, mistaking her for a rioter and preparing to arrest her. In the nick of time, Everest came to the rescue, fighting off all the police officers with incredible skill. He then carried both John and Morgan back to the safety of the hotel. Once they got back inside, Crosby's men finished the job, calmly walking up to the unconscious police officers and shooting them dead. Meanwhile, Sherman had found an empty room to work in. He pulled out the ace of spades card he had lifted from Acapulco's wallet and, with a few precise movements, peeled back the top layer of the card, revealing a secret magnetic key card underneath. As he was examining his prize, Nice walked in, telling Sherman that she knew he had stolen the wallet all along. She joined him for a drink and a frank conversation. Nice then revealed a secret. Her left arm had an array of scars, which were actually tiny chips that granted her automatic membership at every exclusive criminal hospital in the world. She needed them to ensure she could get quick medical help, no matter where her job took her. She then confided that her real reason for being at the Hotel Artemis was to assassinate a target. Just then, a chill went through the room as Sherman showed her the fancy pen he had taken from the bank. Nice revealed that the pen contained a fortune in diamonds, valued at over $18 million. It turned out the diamonds belonged to Wolf King, and the pen was rigged with a tracker. Nice pleaded with Sherman to leave immediately, telling him that Wolf King wasn't there for a bed. He was coming for his missing diamonds, but Sherman refused to go, insisting he would not leave until his brother Lev was safe and on his feet. In a sudden act of concern, Nice kissed him and once again begged him to leave, telling him his life was in grave danger. Back in the medical bay, Jean tried to operate on Morgan, but since she was a non-member, the hotel's automated machines were useless. As Jean was about to begin the manual surgery, she became frozen, a memory of a needle and a beach flooding her mind, a powerful trigger for her agoraphobia and her past trauma. But eventually, she gathered the courage and began the surgery. With the information about Wolf King, Sherman got on the phone and gave an old contact the heads up to have a getaway car ready. He then showed Lev Wolf King's logo, a wolf's head emblem, etched onto the fancy pen. Lev's eyes widened in recognition and pure terror. He knew that Wolf King was an old-school mob boss who had a very specific way of dealing with people who stole from him. He would have them sent to the bottom of the ocean. Sherman tried to calm his brother down, promising him that this was their last job and that they would be out of the life for good once he was on his feet. Meanwhile, after her operation, Morgan had been moved to Jin's personal room to recover. She woke up and saw John sitting beside her, immediately thanking her for saving her life. John told her that she didn't do it because she was a police officer, but because she knew Morgan had been a close friend of her late son. Morgan tearfully apologized for Jean's son's death, a tragedy that made Jean's eyes well up with emotion. John told her to get dressed and that Everest would be escorting her out of the hotel as soon as he got the code blue signal. Alone in the lobby, Jean's nerves started to get the best of her. She began to prepare Niagara, the room she had planned for Wolf King, but her mind was elsewhere. Her agoraphobia, which she had been fighting to control, was now a constant, nagging presence. A quick look at a photo of her son, Beau, triggered a flashback to the event that had changed her life forever. A young man's body was lying on a deserted beach, a syringe on the sand beside him. The memory was jarring, and she was forced back to reality when a notification flashed on her tablet. Wolf King was just 90 seconds away. Outside, Crosby and his men were already in position and preparing to receive the legendary crime boss. While Jean was dealing with her past, Sherman went on a little excursion of his own. He had seen Jean use a secret door earlier, and his curiosity got the better of him. He found the door and made his way down a hidden passage. At the same time, Acapulco was on the rooftop, impatiently waiting for his helicopter. Suddenly, he was met by Nice, who was also on the roof and had a perfect view of the approaching convoy. Acapulco couldn't help but brag about his escape plan, but a cold truth soon dawned on him. Wolf King was Nice's assassination target. Nice had no time for his boasting and quickly incapacitated him, just as Crosby and his crew arrived at the hotel with Wolf King. The man who came through the doors was a far cry from the ruthless, all-powerful boss they had expected. Wolf King was a mess of bleeding, festering wounds. Jean immediately told Crosby and his crew they couldn't come in, as only Wolf King was a member. They all had to surrender their weapons, including Crosby. Before being taken to the Niagara room, Wolf King gave his son a gold ring, telling him it was his to keep if he didn't make it. It was at that moment that Jean gave the code blue signal over her walkie-talkie, and Everest knew to get Morgan out of there immediately. But before she left, Morgan shared the tragic truth about Jean's son's death. He died from a drug overdose, a fact that had sent Jean into a spiral of depression and drug abuse, costing her her medical license and forcing her into the secrecy of the Hotel Artemis. As Everest and Morgan made their way to the secret exit, they had a tense encounter with Sherman. He saw them go through the hidden door and noticed that Morgan's shoes were a dead giveaway that she was a cop. Despite the monumental risk, Sherman let them go without saying a word, an act of silent deference that showed a surprising side of him. Meanwhile, on the roof, Nice was busy setting a 5-minute timer on a cigarette pack. It was actually a bomb, and her plan was simple: detonate it and knock out the hotel's backup generator, plunging the place into total darkness and making it easier to hunt her target. Inside, Jean was about to face her own demons. With her heart in her throat, she began operating on Wolf King. She injected him with a heavy dose of Benzitrix, a powerful truth serum. With the serum flowing through his veins, Jean went for the jugular, asking the man if he knew her son. Wolf King, in a drugged haze, told her that he did. Jean was completely floored. She had never mentioned Beau's name to him, and he had no way of knowing. At the same time, a citywide curfew had gone into effect, meaning the police would now be operating with an even heavier hand. Morgan and Everest knew they were in for a dangerous journey. As they were making their way out, Morgan borrowed Everest's walkie-talkie to give Jean a farewell and to deliver a profound piece of wisdom. She told Jean that she had to find a way to let go of her grief, that what's done is done, and she couldn't change the past. Meanwhile, down in his room, Sherman's mind was racing. He pulled out the stolen Ace of Spades card and used it to activate the 3D printer. The machine whirred to life, and soon a sleek, lethal pistol materialized. With the new gun in his hand, Sherman tried to convince Lev that they had to go now, but Lev was still too weak from his injuries to move. Sherman was now caught between a rock and a hard place. He decided that the best move was to stay put and protect his brother, even if it meant risking a full-blown confrontation with Wolf King. Back to Joan. She doubled the dose and went on to ask the question that had haunted her for over 2 decades. In a horrifying admission, Wolf King confessed that Bo had stolen his luxury car and that he had ordered his men to take him to the ocean. He then bribed the police to make it look like an overdose, all so he could find a grieving mother to recruit as the nurse for his secret hospital. The truth hit Jean like a ton of bricks. For 22 years, she had been working for the man who murdered her son. In a flash of blind rage and grief, she took a scalpel and lunged at Wolf King, ready to end his life once and for all. The moment of truth was at hand. With a mere 40 seconds left on the clock, the bomb Nice had planted was nearing detonation, and she was already making her way to Wolf King's room. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, a desperate Acapulco was waiting for his helicopter, which was finally coming in for a landing. But in the blink of an eye, it was all over. The bomb exploded, taking out the generator and plunging the hotel into total darkness. Down in the medical bay, the worst possible thing happened. Lev went into cardiac arrest, his life support machines instantly cut off. Jean raced to his side, using a defibrillator to try and bring him back, but it was no use. Lev was gone. Meanwhile, Nice burst into Wolf King's room and finished her mission. On the other hand, with the explosion, Acapulco's helicopter had to abort its landing, leaving him stranded on the roof and furious. It was in this same moment of chaos that Sherman, looking at Jean's tablet, saw that Wolf King was dead and that Nice was in his room. It didn't take him long to put two and two together. Nice had accidentally killed his brother by cutting the power. Fueled by a mix of rage and grief, he went on the warpath, confronting Nice. Then Acapulco showed up and confronted them. A gunfight happened and Sherman got shot, but Nice managed to kill Acapulco. Just as the smoke was clearing, Crosby and his crew blasted their way into the hotel. Using a bomb hidden in his father's ring, Crosby blew the door panels wide open, and the rest of his crew followed by smashing through the walls. Their mission was clear: retrieve the diamonds. It was a chaotic free-for-all, and Everest made a snap decision, holding off Crosby and his men so John and Sherman could make a run for it. Nice, seeing the anguish on Sherman's face and knowing she was responsible for Lev's death, picked up a handful of scalpels and joined the fight, a grim apology for the grief she had caused. On the ground floor, Jean and Sherman were just about to escape through the main entrance when they ran straight into Crosby. Furious, he prepared to kill Jean for failing to save his father, but Sherman quickly pulled out the diamond-filled pen. Thinking on his feet, Sherman offered Crosby a chance to take over the criminal underworld, arguing that with Wolf King dead, his gang would be looking for a new leader. He handed over the diamonds, the ultimate status symbol, giving Crosby a claim to the throne. Crosby, blinded by ambition and greed, took the pen and let Sherman go, but he had no intention of letting Jean leave alive. Sherman saw through that and fought him. Eventually, Jean used a sedative and drugged Crosby. They managed to kill him. For the first time in 22 years, Jean stepped outside of the Hotel Artemis into the fresh air. She and Sherman were greeted by the sight of rioters still fighting in the streets. They found their getaway car waiting for them, but Jean had made up her mind. Instead of running, she was going to stay and use her skills to help the sick and wounded rioters. She instructed Sherman to go to a secret hospital in Las Vegas to get his bullet wound treated, telling him the address, the Apache, before they went their separate ways. Jean had finally found peace with her past. She had avenged Beau's death and had a new purpose. Sherman, for his part, had finally kept his promise to Lev. He was free from the life of crime, able to do whatever he wanted without having to look over his shoulder. The film ends with a final shot of Nice and Everest, still alive inside the hotel, having survived the carnage. Everest was now the head of the Hotel Artemis, ready to carry on the legacy.